Greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome to today's bonus. Before we jump into it, a couple links. As you all know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. The merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They all were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost you a cent. Click that like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of these informative videos I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because they all help this channel to continue to grow and go. And yes, folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into today's bonus, shall we?
All right, guys, today's first encounter is an encounter that really kind of, I guess, resonates with how intelligent these creatures are, how strong, and truly how fast they are. They are the apex predator of the woods. These creatures are just truly a force to be reckoned with, and this encounter really proves that. It was the time of year for our annual caribou hunt in 1989, when my hunting partner and I ventured into the area below the Ketok Ridge, alongside the Ketok River in British Columbia. We were working the area between the river and Mountain Maripole and Carnarvon, with Hamilton Ridge to our south. It was a crisp morning, and we were seeing some animals starting to move, with none of them being to our liking, and the distance between us and the herd was far too great. Having seen this activity, we decided to follow the direction of the herd in hopes of seeing a more substantial animal at that point. We had made our way all the way down to where the warden's cabin is located, on the southwest side of Hamilton Ridge, and we're now at a point where we were sandwiched between Hamilton and Tosher Ridge, respectively. At this point, my partner and I were sitting with our bodies facing in opposite directions. I was combing Hamilton Ridge with my binoculars, and my partner was combing the Ketok with his. We had to have been sitting there for over an hour, observing the movements of a number of caribou, when my partner said to me, "I have never seen a timber wolf that big in my entire life. Check this thing out." On his cue, I turned and began to fix my binoculars on the area in which he was now pointing. At this point, the two of us were now sitting with our eyes fixed on what appeared to be a wolf that was the size of a bull elk. A fact in which, of itself, is hard to digest mentally. The distance was great, but based on the size of the largest caribou which it was stalking, walking well below them, it was twice the size of the largest male, which didn't make any sense. To me, what I was seeing was an impossibility in the natural world. A timber wolf that size would have to weigh in the neighborhood of 500 pounds. Which just can't be. As I was looking at this creature, I said to my partner that it must be a bear, but even as I said that, I didn't believe my own words, in that its coloration was not right for a bear, and yet the rump sat too high with the spine to be the profile of a wolf. It was truly a puzzlement to both of us. We sat watching this creature, just obviously stalking the herd from a lower position on the ridge. It must have been 20 minutes or so, as we both sat watching intently, that this creature lifted off the ground with what we believed to be its front legs, which were now hanging from its body, and began to make its way up the hill toward the herd, appearing just as a hunter would, holding his rifle, trying to get closer without being seen. This thing was now walking hunched over like a man. It made its way into position behind some brush, where it once again squatted down and was evidently watching the activity above it, just as we were. The herd was lumbering along and had to have consisted of over 50 animals or more, when suddenly, as we watched, this beast made a lightning-fast movement, closing the gap between itself and the herd, repositioning itself behind another group of brush just below them. A couple of the caribou seemed momentarily startled as they began to trot, but then all the things settled down once again. Just moments later, this creature launched itself into an uphill and diagonal run, aiming toward the middle of the herd. The animals began to run, but the creature, being much faster in our eyes, closed the gap quickly and launched its body, swatting a female to the ground with what appeared to be one blow from its now extended arm, very much like a grizzly would whack down an animal from the back into a chase. It was now on top of the caribou, thrashing at its body in a violent manner with both of its now apparent arms. This creature, while straddling the caribou's body, had thrown so many blows in such a brief amount of time that it was inconceivable to our eyes how many had actually been thrown. This was followed by a long pause where it just sat atop of the victim, apparently resting and eyeing its prize. Some 15 minutes later or so, this wolf-man-like beast stood to its feet and hoisted the caribou, placing it over its shoulders like a woman wearing a mink stole, and began to walk back down the slope, angling to our north. It was then that I said to my partner, "I have to see its face." And leveling my sight on the hill in front of it, I pulled the trigger, firing a single shot, the sound of which bounced back and forth between the two ridges, and it was loud. As soon as the blast occurred, this wolf man stopped in its tracks, looking directly at us. Immediately my partner said, "Look at that sucker's head. It's a snout, pointed ears, and it's damn half-human wolf." He was right. Its body was long and lanky, covered it what was a gray hair or fur, and from our perspective, had a long but tapered snout, like a gray wolf would, with what seemed to be a variety of colorations in its face. Its ears were protruding upward from its head like two triangles, and there was no doubt about it. It stood there apparently unafraid of who we were or what we could potentially do to it for almost 2 minutes. The creature then began to trot away with what was a very large strides across the face of the ridge at a speed which quite simply a man could not achieve. And all of this while shouldering what must have been 200 to 300 pounds of animal on its back. In what was a matter of only a few moments, this wolf creature had covered about a half a mile and disappeared into the timber at the base to our north. My partner and I just sat there comparing notes about what we had just seen. When we had seen it on the caribou, straddling the back was lean and V-shaped, appearing to be very muscular. When the arms began to thrash at a fallen caribou, they were extremely long. The movements were performed at a speed which seemed like a blur to our eyes. After having risen to its feet, it hoisted the body around its neck and shoulders like you would lift a 5-pound bag of potatoes as if it was nothing. I think the craziest damn moment of all was when we saw it lift up from being on all fours to two legs, which was the defining moment of that sighting. This singular movement completely blew us out of the water. We both at that point knew that we were seeing something totally unique and, quite frankly, extraordinary, if not supernatural. And yet, there it was, hunting and walking, attacking a flesh and blood animal for food. It was just incredible. Now, I normally will break down some encounters at the end of the video. Sometimes I don't. But I really want to with this one right now. And the reason why I think this encounter is important is because you have two hunters who have nothing to gain out of sharing this experience. Obviously, older men. This is their annual caribou hunt, a hunt they've been doing for years. Very experienced woodsmen, hunters. And they witness this just apex predator at its best. It's not going after them, and they can actually witness this hunter hunt its prey and watch how just tactically and strength-wise, agility, speed, everything. I mean, most encounters we hear of is them hunting us or them trying to scare us or just a quick glance. But this is an encounter that really you can really learn from, learn their hunting abilities, learn that these creatures not only are fast and strong, but obviously intelligent and tactical, because it ambushed 50 or more caribou, only being heard once. And it was such a quiet instance of being heard that the herd went back to doing what it was doing. And then as it gets up, it doesn't go for a tail end or the front. It goes right for the middle. Like it knew, if I go for the middle, I'm not missing. I'm not going to miss. I have the most probable chance to get dinner this way. Which, it's a tactical movement. No one can deny that. This animal tactically hunted, and these two men were able to watch it. And to me, that is an encounter that I would pay money to be in that situation. I would be scared, obviously, watching it go down, knowing what we know. But these men didn't know. They bore witness to it for the first time at its maximum potential. Unbelievable encounter. Let's get to tonight's second encounter. Tonight's second encounter is a subscriber submitted email I received on the 29th of March. I live in Youngstown, Ohio, and grew up on the north side of the city. If you look up pics of the old steel mills, you'll get an understanding of just what I'm talking about. My buddy literally lived across from the street from the mills, and we would regularly go down there and investigate this massive area, all but shut down and dilapidated. We had this certain old buildings that we'd frequent, and one we turned into a home base. We spent weeks making walls, strengthening spots so no one could get in, especially the wild dogs that also frequented the area and were especially vicious. They traveled in packs of 6 or more. The building we went to all the time had no stairs, so we had to jump up to get in. It made it safer for us. It was right by an active railroad. The other working steel mill nearby used it to get its supplies in and out. Fast forward to the summer. We were there one night. We always had firearms with us. It was Youngstown, Ohio in the early 90s. Murder town, USA. Plenty of Bloods and Crips. We had chosen an old factory that was huge. We'd have massive fires right on the floor of the first floor. We erected a wall of these metal U-shaped things that gave us privacy and safety. If anyone saw us from the railroad, they would certainly call the police and security would be there to get us in trouble. Well, we're hanging out and we heard the pack of dogs coming. We thought it sounded like they were chasing something. We went out to see and they ran near us over this huge mound of coke that steel mills use for the steelmaking process. They ran over and we heard a fight ensue. Vicious attacks going on. All dogs involved. After maybe 6 to 7 seconds, we heard a louder dog above all the others, and the beginning screams of the wild dogs started. Then, to our shock at different times, wild dogs were literally being thrown over the mound in different directions. Finally, all of the wild dogs ran away in the direction they had come, but as fast as they possibly could run, some limping and others with obvious injuries. We were shocked. Then, one of my friends screams, "What is that? Look!" At that moment, I kid you not, a giant wolf-like animal, the size of which seemed quite honestly fake, crawls on all fours to the top of the mound and is looking directly into the area the wild dogs ran. It lifts its leg and subsequently and substantially releases a urine flow that honestly seemed like it was released out of a garden hose. That right there may sound amusing. It scared the hell out of us because it had the idea of just how large this thing was. One of my buddies stumbled backwards into our makeshift wall, and it then turned its attention to us. I cannot relay to you the amount of fear we all immediately felt. The hairs on my arms are standing up as I'm writing this. It had yellowish amber-colored eyes that literally glowed like they had a power source behind them. Looking back on it, we agreed it was from the light of the huge bonfire that we had made in our home base. It growled next, and it was so deep we felt it. I said out loud that I just felt it in my chest, and my 2 buddies said they were all of a sudden lightheaded and getting sick. I didn't feel that at that moment, but we were horrified. It then did something so shocking, so alien to the status quo that we immediately felt in danger and ran inside the building and up 2 sets of broken, missing, fallen apart concrete steps to the 3rd level. We are all very lucky that no one fell, at least broken bones type of fall, maybe even worse. It stood on its hind legs, its back legs. They looked like a huge set of dog legs, but large leg muscles were reminiscent of a bodybuilder but thicker. And just the look of its massive body was unbelievably impressive and intimidating. My one friend was crying, so terrified. When we got to the 3rd floor, we had to smack and shake him to shut up, as well as cover his mouth until he almost passed out from lack of air. We hoped it had left. It didn't. After what seemed like an hour, but only was maybe a couple of minutes, we hear it climb up the outside and start entering the building. We first saw the shadow of it, which was 10 times larger than the beast. We all froze. No one dared make a sound. We should have dropped down out of sight, but we were so terrified we just stood there staring. It came into the light, and we saw everything on that animal. It was at least the size of a grizzly bear. Again, the size was so large it was hard to believe that we were not dreaming, that this thing was real. It was, and it was happening 20 feet in front of us. It started growling, sniffing the air, and then automatically looked straight up at us like it knew we were right there. This whole time, its eyes glowing. The thing that stood out to us was it started drooling, and not a little. It was pouring out of its mouth. It was pouring from the idea that it was going to eat, to kill us. It could have easily. It looked away from us and saw the stairs. We froze again and got a newfound feeling of horror. It was heading to the stairs to come up to where we were. We started freaking out, looking around, and had only one escape, the outside fire escape, going up to the roof. The part to go down had rusted and fell over long ago. It hopped easily over the 3 steps missing and was instantly on the 2nd floor. It was walking to the next set of stairs, and at that moment, we heard the most beautiful sound ever, a train coming right by the building, slowly too. They had to see the fire because when they were passing the building, they let loose the treason horn, and it freaked out this wolf-like creature. It looked towards the opening of the building and in 2 seconds was out of the building and gone. We all started screaming for help, which no one heard, but also we were just screaming from stress because we felt we were going to be okay, possibly. When the train could no longer be heard, the fear set back in, and we thought every single sound was this thing coming back for us. It didn't, thank God. We then started to remember we had 3 pistols with us. We all took them out, took the safeties off, and started making our way back down to the 2nd floor, waiting 20 minutes and then to the 1st floor. Waited probably an hour before we ventured back outside, pointing our guns and flashlights in front of us. Remember, we didn't have LED lights in the early 90s. These were those cheap plastic ones that only lit so much. But 4 of them helped light the way. We thought for sure every second we were making our way back to my friend's house, this thing was coming after us. We heard the wild dogs from a distance and started running. We ran until we got to my buddy's house. Those of us who are still alive talk about it that night every time we see each other. And when we talk on the phone, we will remember that experience until we die. I still am in awe that these things exist. Every time I see or hear an experience with one of these, I freeze. I am instantly brought back to that night, and I feel true horror once again. Tonight's final encounter. My wife and I lived in Idlewild for almost 18 years of our marriage. And it was close to the end of that period that we were out walking on one of those usual trails and saw something so freaky that I sometimes still have trouble accepting that it really happened. It was one of those muddier spring days we had seen. I remember how we almost backed out of going on our daily walk, but we had recently started an intense weight loss regimen and didn't want to cheat ourselves out of progress. The trailhead was about a 5-minute drive from where we lived. Even though we walked on this trail often, we usually turned around when we arrived at a sharp incline that you could use to get to the top of the mountain. My wife had a bit of a hip problem back then, and it would ache if she did anything too strenuous. But she said she was feeling ambitious that day and wanted to keep going. Eventually, you would get to the point of the trail where you could see a very large gray facility that didn't have any windows and was surrounded by tall barbed wire fence. Neither of us thought much of it, assuming it was just an electrical building. The facility had to have been a solid 100 yards from the fence. There was plenty of trees in the middle, making the building difficult to see once everything had bloomed in the summer. It was the first hike where the facility caught my lasting attention. There's a gigantic rip in a section of fence close to the trail. I kid you not when I say it looked like a giant had peeled it apart with its massive hands. Something about that scene felt very off, like something remarkably unusual had occurred. There was also an odd smell to the air, but it was not uncommon to come across the scent of decay in these parts. Wildlife was everywhere. I wasn't sure if we should keep walking, but my wife felt enthusiastic that day and she was determined to keep going. Initially, she didn't seem too concerned about the break in the fence. She merely assumed it was a large buck had gotten its antlers caught in it and eventually managed to pull the thing apart to free itself. We didn't stick around long, but we ran into a brigade of armed men after we continued up the path. They were dressed in camouflage and were carrying high-caliber weapons. Since I had never seen anything like that around here, I asked the men what was happening. "Move along," one of them replied. I explained that I just wanted a simple explanation for whether there was potential danger in the area where we reside. Still, the same gentleman disregarded my question and suggested we head back towards our car. Since the group looked serious, my wife and I agreed it was probably best to return home. "What do you think that was about?" I remember my wife asking. I couldn't say, but I wouldn't be surprised if it had to do something with that hole in the fence. We heard footsteps behind us. When we were about halfway back to the car, my wife and I turned around simultaneously, expecting to see a fellow hiker who had gotten caught up in it too, but it was something else entirely. My wife shrieked when we locked eyes with this being that had to have been at least 8 feet tall. It had all black hair with olive-colored skin visible on its face, hands, and feet. We couldn't believe our eyes. Although we spotted it, the tall figure maintained the same pace as it walked towards us. The only time it broke eye contact was once when it checked to see if anyone or anything was following it. And that was when I noticed it had to turn its entire torso. The neck on this thing was almost non-existent. In all of my life, I had never seen something so large, so muscular. I can't even begin to imagine the strength this creature possessed. That aspect alone was one of the most disturbing things I had ever encountered. We were walking down the ridge when we spotted the massive creature, and all we could do was step to the side and get out of its way, hoping that it would leave us alone. After we stepped out of its way, it got down onto all fours and ran like a large cat. It was that light on its feet before we knew it. It was out of sight. Its speed was incomprehensible. I don't understand how anything can run that fast, especially something that appeared to have human DNA. Due to that encounter and the broken fence, my wife and I believe that building is some sort of secret government facility, perhaps one where they can conduct experiments on things most of us don't know exist. I've read about so many different types of creatures and countless encounters. Therefore, I cannot be 100% sure what we ran into. For all we know, this thing was some twisted experiment gone wrong, and the subject broke out of the facility. That's my theory, but who's to say that the laboratory wasn't cloning these creatures? The more I think about it, the more bizarre possibilities I come up with. In any case, my wife and I are grateful that that creature did not attack us. There wouldn't have been absolutely anything we could have done to prevent that animal from taking our lives. One swipe from something that size would have knocked a man's head clean off. No wonder there was a whole brigade of armed men searching for this thing. I'm sure that even they would find it challenging to take one of these creatures out. It sure is a strange world out there that we live in. I feel great sympathy for all the folks who have encountered these things, but didn't live to talk about them. There needs to be more transparency about this subject. I agree. I do agree. Anyway, guys, yeah, that's pretty crazy.
All right, guys, I hope you all enjoyed that bonus upload as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. Guys, I truly do appreciate all of your support. Your support is what makes this channel special and what continues to make it grow. Please, everyone, stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, our pets, our family, and friends. These creatures are real. They're out there and they are dangerous. Share this information with the people you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions and never stop looking for answers.